So the Super Eagles of Nigeria booked their place in the round of 16 at the ongoing African Cup of Nations in Morocco. Who would have thought? Hey, I did think about it. Bankole, maybe not so much gave the Super Eagles of Nigeria a fighting chance. But hey, I said the Super Eagles will prevail, and we have prevailed thus far. Welcome to another exciting edition of your favorite sports show, Sports Pizza. Edwin in the building. We have so much to talk about, so much to unpack on the show today, from the world of football and of course to the battle of sexes in tennis, where yes, the Australian ensured that maybe what a man can do, a woman doesn't necessarily have to do it on all platforms. Once again, welcome to Sports Pizza. You know, I'll wrap up the show. We'll wrap up with the Tipsters Corner. We'll give you tips going into the weekend. And this weekend, we have some interesting games, not just from the English Premier League, but also the Italian Serie A and the Spanish La Liga. Let's go on a break, catch our breath. When we come back, we're going to get locked in. It is Sports Pizza. Don't go nowhere. Welcome back. It is Sports Pizza. Good to have my homeboy Banky on set. Banky.
Edwin, it's always good to be here. And in your intro, you threw shades at me.
I didn't throw shades now.
Let me quickly address that. I didn't give the Super Eagles a fighting chance at winning the AFCON. Not at coming out of the group stage. I still believe they were good enough to. We are playing against Uganda and Tanzania in our group. Maybe the game against Tunisia was well above my expectations of the Super Eagles, but we were supposed to come out of the group stage. Now, going forward, if you go on and win the entire tournament, I think if we even go on to get to the finals here, we have surpassed my expectations. I don't see us getting to the finals, or I did not, see us getting into the finals of the African Cup of Nations. But if we do, it's all good and fine.
All right, before we get to the African Cup of Nations in detail, can we just do a bit of reflection for the year 2025? Because 2026 is going to be another big year, and we'll expect a lot of big things. Do you get? But on a sporting level, can you just do a top 3 sporting moments for 2025?
Top 3 sporting moments for 2025. I think number 1 has to be the loss of Jota. I think that was something that rocked the entire footballing nation, even
not
sports,
just football,
even sports industry at large. It was, I think, for a very long time, it was a player that was really involved in almost everybody's life that died, and you can clearly see how a lot of people are still struggling. A lot of Liverpool fans, a lot of Liverpool players, are still struggling, to come to terms with the fact that Diego Jota is no longer amongst us. But I think that has to be number 1 for me. I think PSG. Winning the Champions League, the treble basically, has to be number 2. Even though unfortunately they lost out in the Club World Cup to Chelsea, they'll probably be the first team to win all of that trophy. But I think PSG number 2, and finally Lando Norris winning the Formula 1 title, especially after the cracking season that we had, the start of Oscar Piastri, the challenge of Max Verstappen, and finally the title landing on Lando Norris. I think these 3 moments for me stood out, but for me it has to be the loss of Diego Jota. I think that was probably the events that had the biggest, would I say, effect on sport lovers in 2025.
All right, for me, in no particular order, Lando Norris, the Falcons, Mission X was accomplished this year, and at number 3, Manchester United did not get relegated. So those are my top 3 sporting moments for 2025. Can you just do a prediction for 2026? Any prediction, any sports?
Milan will win the Scudetto.
Okay.
I also think that Djokovic will win a Grand Slam.
Okay.
Max Verstappen will be back to winning the Formula 1 title. Interesting.
So for me, Arsenal will win the Premier League title. Lando Norris will retain his title, Formula 1, and the Super Eagles will win the AFCON.
Okay.
All right, let's go into the AFCON proper. So far, so good. What has been your review of the entire tournament?
Well, I think it has been enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think we've seen some of the best football in a very long time, especially on the continent. I thought the tournament at Ivory Coast was quite good, but I think this one has gone up another level. And I said something to you on another platform as maybe it might sound simple, but I think the quality of the pitch might have helped in the way that these teams have played so far in a way, and especially after you consider that in the last 5 to 10 years there has been a serious Europeanization, of African, players, and there's a lot of emphasis with the ball on the ground. So you see how having good pitches can help in improving the quality of play, and I think that's perfect. The game against Gabon, Mozambique provided 5 goals. Nigeria, Tunisia also provided 5 goals. You look at the Morocco Mali game, the Ivorians against the Cameroonians. These were high quality games that were on show for the AFCON. So I think it has been really good. I think the big teams also have done well so far. The Malians, the Senegalese, even Nigeria also has turned up to the party. So but it's looking like an AFCON that we won't see any type of upset. I think when we get into the knockout stages, it will be the familiar faces. The Moroccans of this world, the Nigerians of this world, the Egyptians of this world. I think these are the guys that will still dominate the latter stages. Unlike the last time where we were seeing the likes of Angola, where we were seeing the likes of South Africa, I don't think we'll be seeing a repeat of that in this tournament.
It's time to narrow it down to the Super Eagles of Nigeria. We're through to the round of 16. Your highlights, lowlights?
I think my lowlight has been Nwabali, Stanley Nwabali. You look at his performance, you look at his behavior, his antics, both on and off the pitch. It has been quite questionable. I saw the press conference he gave, after the game against Tunisia, and it was a whole lot of excuses as to why his behavior should be justified, and I don't necessarily agree with it. I think a goalkeeper who is playing at that level, who is playing for the Super Eagles of Nigeria, whatever club side you might be playing for, I expect a certain level, of performance from you. I expect a certain level of responsibility, from you. And he has not shown, any form of level-headedness, so far in this tournament. But even in the game against Tunisia, I thought he could have been, he could have gotten a red card, especially for that tackle. If it wasn't an oversight from the referee, if the referee had allowed an advantage, would have been talking about a Nigerian team with 10 men, especially when we've been on the ascendancy all through, that encounter. And things like this are things that can cost us that can cost us in knockout stages. So I think Stanley Nwabali has been my low light. My highlight has been Alex Iwobi. For a player who I have been, one of his biggest critics, for a player who also I believe has not done well, for the Super Eagles in a long stretch. I think this tournament has shown another side to him. I think his application on the field has been very good. He has been a point of control, for the Super Eagles, and even to a certain extent a point of creativity, for the Super Eagles. So I think Alex Iwobi should be my highlight, and Stanley Nwabali my low light.
How about Eric Chell, the coach?
I really don't. I don't know how to place Eric Chell. I think he has been decent, but I also think there are so many ways at which another tactician or another decent manager can take advantage of the Super Eagles team. His game management has been questionable. I think he's prioritizing. He's struggling to identify his best players, especially in terms of roles and position. You look at Samuel Chukwueze playing, in midfield, a winger playing in midfield, Dele Bashiru playing, a midfielder playing as a winger. So I think he's struggling to come to terms with the fact that maybe a lot of these guys are not as good as he probably thought they were, or maybe he doesn't understand, how to utilize them in their best possible roles. But this is a tournament football. You can only, go as far as, the quality of your players. And if you have Adelema Lukman and Victor Osimhen, playing at their best right now, I think he would also improve his chances as being one of the best managers, in the tournaments.
Now let's move on to the countries that will probably stop the Super Eagles from winning the 2025 African Cup of Nations. You have Morocco in the mix, host country. You have Senegal. You have the Ivorians. There's Cameroon. There's Egypt. There's Algeria. Which of these teams, Bankole, do you fancy to not just stop the Super Eagles of Nigeria, but go on to leave the African Cup of Nations? Because if you win the African Cup of Nations, there's a possibility that you might have eliminated the Super Eagles of Nigeria. So which of these countries is best placed to eliminate us in the knockout stage?
I think for me, it has to be Senegal. I think you look at what Senegal has done so far in this tournament. They're a well-balanced team, and I've always talked about how there's a a balance, between their inexperience and their experienced players.
Yeah.
There's a fine blend of youth, and veterans, in that team. Kalidou Koulibaly, Iliman Ndiaye, you can see Sadio Mane also, right there, Nicholas Jackson. Even in midfield, you look at the quality of players on their bench. They are ceiling, in terms of improving their current game state is also, I think, is the highest, in the entire tournament. So I think it has to be Senegal. When it gets to the physical side of things, they know, how to match whatever opponents there will. When it also comes to the technique side of things, they are also, up there with some of the best. So I think for every other team, we have an advantage, or we can have an advantage in a certain aspect of the game over there. But I think Senegal beats us hands down.
All right, so I can understand why Banky was a bit pessimistic before the start of the African Cup of Nations. But hey, that performance against Tunisia, I think for the first 70 minutes, man, I took solace in that performance, and I think even against Senegal, we can hold our own. It's time to go on a break. When we return, there's so much to unpack on the show. Remember, it's not only the AFCON, club football, left, right, center, particularly in the Premier League, and it seems to be a three-way Premier League title challenge. Welcome back from that short break. It's time to pivot into club football, and we're starting with the English Premier League. The last time I asked you this question, Bankole, you said Aston Villa were not in the Premier League title race. Have you changed your mind, or you stick with your opinion?
Yeah, I still think it's still a two-way battle between Arsenal and Man City. I think those are two guys who, in terms of quality, I think there's a significant gap between themselves and Aston Villa. I think for Aston Villa, the X factor has to be Unai Emery. You look at Oli Watkins, you look at maybe Morgan Rogers has been good, Tielemans, Kamara, John McGinn. These are guys who have been good in patches, this season. But in the overview of Aston Villa, the one person you want to give credit to is the manager. Is the guy who has gotten the best, out of this team so far this season. But for Man City and Arsenal, they have players who can, to a certain extent, bail them out. They are sprinkled with individual brilliance, if you can put it that way. But I think they've been good. That's Villa. But in terms of the title, in terms of challenging for the title, in terms of maintaining this consistency for the long stretch in this season, I still think it has to be between Arsenal and Man City.
Still with the title challengers, Bankole. You narrowed it down to Manchester City and Arsenal, or let me say Arsenal, Manchester City, regardless. What do these clubs need in January transfer markets to beef up their squad and see them push for the title come May?
I don't think either of them has to go to the transfer market. I think they've spent enough money already, and there's
City what's Semenyo?
I think it is. Will I say it is spending money for the sake of it? You have the likes of Jeremy Doku, you have the likes of Savio, you have the likes of Ryan Cherki, Omar Mamouche, Phil Foden. These are attackers already. Already in the north of what 200 million, and I'm not even talking about the certain Tijani Reinders who can also play as a number 10. So I think it is an overstretch, on City's view. If they are going to splash another 65 million on Semenyo, even though I think he might go on to improve their team, he might give them an added advantage. But I don't think they necessarily have to dip their hands into the January transfer window. For Arsenal, so I think it's the same thing. I think these are two guys who have done good business in the summer, especially for Arsenal. Even though a lot of their signings have not exactly hit the ground running, aside from the defensive midfielder, that's Zubimendi. You look at Victor Gyökeres, and Noni Madueke, they're still, struggling to provide, value in terms of goals and assists. But yeah, I think these are two teams who have created a good team as a whole. I don't think it is down to individual. Maybe more for Man City than Arsenal, because you look at Haaland and the amount of goals he has scored this season. So I think both teams are quite fine in the way they are, barring any injuries going forward. I think both teams are quite adequate in terms of challenging for the title.
From the title challengers, let's come down a bit. Let's go to Chelsea. You look at Chelsea, on one side of the coin, they look like a talented side that can match some of the best teams toe to toe. On the other side of the coin, you see a talented team, but an inconsistent talented team.
Yeah, for Chelsea, I think their issue is very complicated. First of all, I think the sporting directors could have done better with the quality of players that they brought in. Even if your philosophy is to bring in young players, I think there are still better young players out there than the current crop of players that you have at Chelsea. I think there are still young 21, 22 wingers who I would pick ahead of a certain Alejandro Garnacho, ahead of a certain Pedro Neto, for instance. But yeah, I also think the incompetency of the sporting directors, there's also a certain level of incompetency from the manager from the mentality side. I think if there's anybody who's responsible, for beefing up the squad mentally, if there's anybody who is responsible for instilling, certain cultures, into the dressing room, it has to be the manager, especially for a young team that are quite amendable, for a young team that you believe that you can actually, instill certain values to at that particular age. I expect more from Enzo Maresca, but for a manager who his biggest experience has been the championship before the Chelsea job, you don't really know how much you can get out of him. But for Chelsea, they still have quality sprinkled all around. Reece James, I think Wesley Fofana also is good. Levi Colwill is out of the season, but I also think if he's fit, he's also one of the best young defenders around. But the manager has to do better. The manager has to, he has to do a lot of work. He has to do proper coaching, with this team to get them challenging for the title. Even though I think there is a cap on their ceiling, especially with the quality of players that have been brought in. But I think with a good manager, with a manager who can instill a certain level of mentality, with a manager who can make them feel like they are better, than every other person, they can go a very long way.
So enough of football. Let's do tennis. It was a battle of sexes, Banky. We've had a few of this in the past, but this time was the 671st ranked male tennis player, Nick Kyrgios, versus the top ranked women's tennis player, Aryna Sabalenka. It ended a straight set win for Nick Kyrgios, 6-3, 6-3. You look at the courts, it was a different dimension at both ends. For Nick Kyrgios, it was the standard dimension. For Sabalenka's, it was reduced by about 9%. Each player only had one serve in the game. The whole idea of this, I still don't understand. Like, what is the essence? What are they trying to prove? Who stands to gain from the battle of sexes?
I think both players stands to gain financially.
The money part.
But in terms of the perception of the sport, I don't think it changes anything. People have talked about, look, Sabalenka sets women tennis 10 years back. I don't think so. I think anybody with an ounce of common sense understands that male tennis is much more intense, it's much more physical,
demanding.
Even in terms of quality, it is higher
level,
than that of female tennis. So whatever it is that they did in Dubai, I don't think would have an effect on how people view, female tennis. But for Sabalenka and Nick Kyrgios, I think this is something that would favor them financially. I'm not necessarily against it. If you have an exhibition that would pay, the players, by all means, go ahead, and because tennis players usually rely on endorsements, rely on exhibition matches to get paid. So if especially for a Nick Kyrgios who is not going to win a Grand Slam anytime soon, probably to even qualify for a Grand Slam is going to be quite difficult, for a player like himself. So I think it has to be. I think it's just normal. I don't think there should be any fuss, made about what we saw in Dubai.
The conversation about equal pay once again came to the fore on social media, and you have the camp where they say it doesn't really mean men and women should earn equally in tennis. And there's the other camp that says, hey, this is another reason why men and women cannot earn equally.
I don't have a problem with men and women earning equally as long as it's proportionate to your revenue. If you look at what male tennis is bringing in, and you look at what female tennis is bringing in. If female tennis is bringing in much more money than male tennis, I expect them to be paid more than the male guys. But if it's the other way around, then there should be no conversation about equal pay. It's the same thing with the United States in terms of football. Their female team is earning more, than their male team, because why? The female team, are bringing a lot of money, for the federation than the male team. So you look at all of this. If you are not making enough money to warrant how much you should be paid, then they shouldn't even have a say, in how much the men teams, are being paid. You look at how much money is being generated from the Premier League, from the Grand Slams, the ATP titles. You look at all, even exhibition games, between male tennis players, raking a lot more money, than what is expected from the women's side of things. So I don't have a problem with equal pay as long as the equal pay you are demanding is proportionate to the revenue you are generating.
Thank you very, very much, Banky, for that succinct explanation. It's time to go on a break. We'll give you our video for the week. When we return, we'll wrap up the show with the Tipsters Corner. Welcome back. We head straight to our Tipsters Corner, and this time we have two games from the English Premier League and the Italian Serie A. In England, it is Manchester City versus Chelsea, and in the Serie A, it is Atalanta versus AS Roma. Banky.
Yeah, for me, I think for City against Chelsea, I think a double chance for City seems value. If you want to be brave, you can go for a straight win City. A 1-up or a 2-up, whatever it is that would add enough value to your ACCA if you want to single it out. But I think City would be taking something out of this game. I think they're a significantly better team than Chelsea, especially when you look at Chelsea's fumbles since the month of December and how it has been a thing of precedence from last season where they struggle at the start of the year also. So I think I think City should be taking this one. I also think we'll see goals, over 1.5 goals, both teams to score would also be something that would give you, enough juice for your ACCA. For Atalanta Roma, I also think this is a game that would see goals, but I think guarantee. I'm not the guy playing, but I think there's a much likelihood that Roma would score in this game. Atalanta defensively have been all over the place. Even offensively, they create a lot of chances, but because they don't have like a proper striker, Skamaka has been in and out of it ever since his injury. The Ketelare also has also not been in his prolific best. Ademola Lookman is out in the AFCON. So you look at all of that, and you'd want to tip Roma to score, but I think he's going to produce a lot of goals, maybe over 1.5, over 2.5. Also, second half over 0.5 is also something. And in terms of corners, also 7.5 corners, 8.5 corners are something that are prevalent in Roma games this season. So yeah, you can go for those options if you want to increase the value of your ACCA.
Thank you very much. Remember, Sports Pizza is not responsible for any bet loss. We'll only give you expert analysis on the possible outcomes of these games. I'm sure you thoroughly enjoyed this edition of the show. 2025 has been a great year, a fantastic year, and we know that 2026 is going to be bigger and better. So expect the best from Sports Pizza. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend that this is the most informative sports show. Plenty of entertainment, plenty of education, and also very, very conversational. Follow us on our social media platforms at Sports Pizza. You can also head to our YouTube page where we have lovely, lovely content for you. Banky, thank you for doing this with me. 2025 was great. 2026,
absolutely. This is it for the year, and hopefully would have a better 2026. Would continue to increase in numbers. Will continue to increase in productivity, in value, and Sport Pizza, one of the best shows on here right now, and even next year we would continue to improve our quality. And from me to our audience, have yourself a lovely, lovely weekend.
Do have a fantastic week. Enjoy the sports. See you same time next week.